Hi, everybody. Murray here from Calvary Chapel University, and I have the privilege of getting to pick an alum of the month from CCU. And so each month we just ask, I personally just ask the Lord, like, who do you want to pick? And, each person that I have met over the years of serving at CCU is just amazing. And so, David Bowman, congratulations on being alum of the month for April.
Thank you so much. It's awesome
You're
to be here.
welcome. It's kind of sweet because we've had some correspondence over the years, and then last summer I was talking to your pastor Tony Clark, and he was just saying so many wonderful things about you, and don't want to make you blush, uh, but it was kind of sweet just to be able to hear from him how the Lord's using you at your church. So you are at Calvary Chapel Newport News in Virginia,
Correct.
and you are serving alongside of Tony Clark.
Yes.
And I just loved, so on our CCU school platform, it's called Populi. Everybody has a bio, and I'm just going to read your bio because I just loved it. It says, loves Jesus, my wife, apologetics, cooking, and the New York football Giants, in that order. I just thought that was great.
Yep.
We'll have to talk apologetics and cooking over a football game someday if I ever get to Virginia.
Absolutely. I look
That
forward to that.
that would be fun. Okay, can you share with me like a 1 minute testimony just so people can get to know you more?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I grew up in New York City, Brooklyn, New York to be exact. And I grew up pretty much, my parents are from the Caribbean originally. So a lot of the Caribbean is Catholic. And so my parents were pretty much nominal Catholics. I was sprinkled as a baby, but we didn't really understand anything or have any interaction with the Protestant faith, Christianity at all until I went to school and I had a schoolmate who their grandmother invited my parents to church one day, and pretty much from that point, the rest is kind of history. And so my schoolmate and I were used to bring my parents to Christ, and once they were saved, pretty much the whole household, right? That was pretty much it. So from there, we started going to church, and I, even though I was baptized as a youngster, I didn't really start to follow Christ personally and intentionally until high school. My
Mm.
dad was a high school teacher, and when I went to high school, I wanted to get involved in the Christian fellowship that was there. It was called Seekers Christian Fellowship. It was just a small club in Brooklyn, New York, in the high school I was at, and God used me for 4 years at that high school. I ended up becoming the vice president for the school for the chapter there, and we did some great ministry for Christ. We weren't perfect at it, but we tried to shine a light in the midst of a dark place. And then from high school, the expectation was to go to college, and I did.
Mhm.
And from there, the Lord took me on a path to a path that was weird, I would say. First
Mhm.
year was not great for me. And
Mhm.
then through that difficulty and through the failure of going to secular school and not knowing what I wanted to do, God comforted me in my failure. He encouraged me, and then he redirected me in a different direction.
Mhm.
And that would include Nyack College,
Mhm.
seminary, and eventually CC.
I was wondering how to pronounce that one. When I saw that, I'm like, oh my goodness, you've done some school. And
Yeah.
so you went to State University of New York at Stony Brook, and then Nyack Seminary. So, how did you hear about CCU?
Well, of course, my senior pastor, Tony Clark, he spoke of it. I told him that I had a desire to learn. I've always been curious by nature, and I was a pretty good student, so to speak, as long as I was driven and knew what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
If I know the direction, I'll definitely go down that path. And so I was asking him about schools, and there were a couple of pastors on staff who had already had their degrees, and I
Mm-hmm.
was wondering what I was going to do. And of course, my wife and I, we were looking at the financial situation too. And so Pastor Tony mentioned that Calvary Chapel has a university, and my first Calvary Chapel experience was Calvary Chapel Newport News. I had no idea that there was a Bible college or a university. fortunately, I was invited to go to one of the East Coast pastors conferences.
Oh,
That's where I was further able to get in touch. They had the little booth or display, and I
uh-huh.
was able to get some
Yeah,
information and talk with Dr. Jason Falzerano.
yeah,
Shout out to him.
yeah.
So it was a great time meeting with them, and pretty much by his suggestion, and then of course the display at the pastors conference, God pretty much confirmed, go and take this venture of faith, and I
Wow.
did.
That is so awesome. I love just your, I don't know, intentionality and just the heart to keep learning and just seeing that. I think it's all of our stories. We all, take a path where it's like at times there's failure, and yet God is so good just to like to pick us up, and it's like, okay, you got to keep going. And if somebody is out there thinking like, oh, I've always wanted to go to school or I've wanted to finish my degree, how was how was the online platform for you?
Well, online was useful, obviously, because I didn't have a lot of I was already working kind of at the church to a certain degree in an unpaid status, and so I didn't have a lot of time. So the online option was definitely what I was looking for. And Calvary Chapel University, first and foremost, they were very helpful in getting my transcripts and transferring over my credits from my previous university experience. And then they allowed me to take, as you had mentioned in your story, one class at a time, which is all I
Yeah.
could take as far as my time and my finances. And the system was fine. Populi was easy to get into.
Mhm.
Making the discussion board comments every week worked fine for me. And submitting my assignments was easy. And having contact with the instructors was easy as well. There was pretty much no difficulty for me. It was intuitive. It was easy, and I enjoyed being able to interact with my fellow classmates as well as my instructors too.
I love the online, you know, platform option, whatever. There's definitely, I think, a learning curve, for people who have never done anything online before, and
Right.
so, but it is navigable, and so and flexible. So I mean, it's like you have the structure, you know what you're supposed to do, you know your assignments, and so I love that about CCU, and so balancing personal life, wife, football, school, um, that was fairly easy in a sense.
That life balance, well, thankfully my wife is an educator, so she was always supportive of my
Oh,
wanting to deepen my education. She
mhm.
had her degrees, her master, her bachelor's and her master, and
Wow.
so she graciously was like, it's time for you to get yours. So I went, and she was always supportive. She knew when I was studying and when my assignments were, and she didn't take offense. She always knew what I was doing, and she loved hearing about my grades and reading my papers and things of
Oh,
that nature. She's very supportive. And
that
so
is so.
thankfully for me, it was easy to maintain that balance. And of course, my church was very supportive. Pastor Tony is very supportive. He knew I
Mhm.
was at school. And so they gave me just enough work to stay busy, but not so much that I was drowning. So,
That's awesome. And so
right.
you graduated with your Bachelor's of Arts degree in Biblical Studies with a Biblical Knowledge specialization. That's amazing. Is that like a certificate of like 8 classes for that?
Yeah. Yeah. Based on the classes that I took, in addition to the
Yeah.
transferable credits
Yeah.
that allowed me to get that specialization.
Wow,
Mhm.
that's awesome. Um, so how has the classes that you took at CCU kind of benefited you in what you're doing now in ministry?
Oh, it's been immensely helpful. I mean, everything from being able to handle baby dedications and
Mhm.
baptisms and talking with people about that. As the assimilation pastor at Calvary Chapel Newport News, I'm on the front lines once people make those decisions. And so
Mm,
being able to clear up what is salvation and what does
mhm.
baptism mean. And also in those moments, you never know when a moment, an interaction will turn into a counseling situation. And so the
Right?
courses that I took on biblical counseling came in very
Mm.
handy as well. And on top of all of that, the apologetics courses, I just finished doing a school of apologetics at the church. So I always go back to my notes. I haven't thrown out any of my
Oh,
notes
right.
from school because I always refer back to those things. So pretty much every class I took at CCU has had a practical outworking in ministry, because everything I do revolves around the schooling that I received, and it's been usable, helpful, and it will continue to be helpful, I believe, as
I,
well.
that is so awesome. I know that their assignments, were very practical. It
Yes.
wasn't just knowledge based. It was how is this worked out practically, in ministry,
Mhm.
and I love that. Did you have a favorite class or like a favorite book that the Lord used?
Oh, well, obviously apologetics. So world
Yes.
religions, apologetics 1 and 2 were definitely helpful. The biblical counseling classes, being introduced to Bob Hoekstra's work,
Oh,
counseling God's way. You know, unfortunately, he's passed away. He's already with the Lord, but I love his work, especially his
oh,
emphasis on the grace of God, because I think
uh-huh.
what you said is very helpful. That for us who are more studious, we can sometimes lack. We can grow in the truth, but not the grace, and so having his teachings on grace and
Mhm.
emphasizing the grace of God in everything that we do when we're preaching, teaching, and especially when we're counseling others, to rely upon the grace of God personally, but also extend that grace to others, was very helpful to me.
Absolutely. Oh, that is so good. Oh, it makes me want to go pull out one of his DVDs and watch it. Um,
Yes.
so he's very dear to me too. We had served a long time ago as missionaries with one of his children, and
Wow.
so, yeah, a long time ago. Um, so you would uh, give a recommendation for CCU, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Take that venture of faith. You can do it one class at a time. It's up to your pace, and God's calling is his enabling. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't step out of the boat and step out in faith and try it out, you never know. In my previous school experience, I didn't always see what others saw in me. And unless you take a step of faith and begin to go and interact with other believers, who knows? God can confirm his calling in that class that you take by that instructor. Something will happen as you're studying. God will let you know the exact trajectory of where you're supposed to go. But if you stay where you are and you don't step out, how will you know?
Right. I love that how it seemed like, for me when I was taking classes, it was like being in a new Bible study every 8 weeks. And it was no matter what class it was, it always applied to where I was at, personally. Just serving if it was in children's ministry or women's ministry, whatever it was. And so, David, it is just such a joy and a pleasure to get to spend a little time with you. Congratulations on being Alum of the Month for April.
Thank you.
We just want to always highlight at CCU what God is doing because, it's at Christ in us, the hope of glory, and it's by his Spirit. And, we've learned, from Pastor Chuck that, God's calling, he enables us and God provides where he guides. And just those basic principles of, like you said, you step out in faith and you trust the Lord and you see what he will do. And so, kind of like, just how in the Jesus Revolution movie, Pastor Chuck was always so encouraging of just taking a risk, with young people. And so, if anybody's watching this video and you're contemplating, should I go to school? Yes, you should. Our heart at CCU is to make disciples, and that's the heart of Jesus, to see people trained and equipped and empowered by God's Spirit for the work of the ministry. And so if you have any questions, you can always go to calvarychapeluniversity.edu and look at our website. You can call David and he'll give you all the help he can give you. And so thank you again, David, just for joining me today. I can't wait for football season. We can watch a football game together.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, God bless you and thank you again for joining me and God bless you all. Bye-bye.